Is it reasonable that the state of Washington spends $1.1 million to get an individual, one single person out of homelessness? That's what we got going on today. Let's get into it. Here we go. All right, so here's the backdrop. Governor Inslee, our esteemed governor of Washington State, he rolls into the South Myers Way encampment. That is the encampment that's had the swimming pool, had a murder, had this senior assisted living apartment across the street, and they couldn't sleep because there was gunshots at all times of day and night. That encampment recently got cleared out, and it was a doozer. It's like 25 acres of just crap, needles, boats, cars, you name it. Whatever illegal activity is, supports the drug system, you could find in that encampment. Well, Jonathan Cho and Jeremy Harris were there. They got some, got information. We're going to go through the Jeremy Harris article here first. And we're going to get into it. And then the governor says a bunch of stuff. You're like, what? Governor Jay Inslee visited the site of the Myers Way homeless encampments in Seattle on Monday, where he touted progress on clearing highway encampments and warned more money. Here's the start of this, and warned more money will be needed in the near future to continue the state's efforts. That's because they've spent almost 150 million people. And I think no matter how you want to look at the numbers, this is shocking. Like, this is like, what? Excuse me? Huh? The 25-acre encampment grew for months along State Route 509 in Seattle's Highland Park neighborhood as seniors who live across the street reported safety concerns both before and after a man was murdered in the camp over the summer. Murder is not uncommon in the encampments, right? Yeah, somebody's got a narc on you. Well, you kill them. And then you roll them up in a tarp and you leave them be, right? That literally happened on the Mercer Street encampment with 80,000 Seattleites whizzing by per day, right? We've done podcasts on all these. We are moving at a rapid pace as the dollars allow, Ensley said after a tour of the site with social workers and Washington State Department of Transportation crews. Washington State is closing encampments. It's getting people housed. It's getting people to break addiction. We make progress one day at a time. We've made very substantial progress in the last year. Yeah, but you've also spent damn near $150 million. Now, I should say that does include some capital infrastructure development, meaning they're going to build some stuff that'll be there for longer than just, this past year, 2023. That aside, we're going to get to that, right? So stay tuned. So the Myers Way encampment was closed last week after months of outreach efforts to the people living there. Social workers were able to place 30 of the 36 people at the encampment into housing prior to being removed. During his visit, Inslee also met with Diane Rashett, who lives at a senior apartment across the street, goes into talked about that. She's like, this is the Wild West. It's crazy. It's crazy town. The encampment has grown considerably, and a lot of the folks have just moved down the street from what was there. The state estimated the Myers Way encampment ranged between 30 and 50 people living at the site. Neighbors described the encampment as the wild, wild west. So I wouldn't say it was elated when this thing got cleared out. You can spew words all you want. We've had a lot of that today. They should have come when we first started calling them. And that is how so much of this should have gone. The work was done under the state's right-of-way initiative. Okay. Got to remember that, which was given $150 million by the state's legislature in 2022 to deal with homeless encampments around the highways. This is strictly dealing with folks around the highways. So I covered the Ship Canal Bridge encampment once that had been cleared out. That's the one where we had fireworks going off into I-5. Remember that? I mean, just crazy town. And then we also had an encampment recently get cleared out, and that was in between I-5 and Harborview Medical Center because there was a bombing of a fentanyl smoking tent. Yeah, I mean, we got good stuff going on here in Seattle, right? Ensley said those funds are starting to run out, the $150 million for this clear out the right of way. The State Department of Commerce, which administers the initiative's funds, estimates that there's enough money to keep operations going until June of 2025. This is kind of like we are climbing a mountain. We're going uphill. We're climbing as fast as we can, and we're making progress. I think we've had quite a visible change on the I-5 corridor, Inslee said. Maybe for now, temporarily, but long term, hell to the no. No, because these folks just keep coming back, right? These folks keep coming back. Here's where you want to pay attention. As of July 31st, 870 people have been moved indoors since the program started. 150 million, 870 people moved indoors. Of those, 714 are still in housing. Right? So a bunch left. They got out of the system or they exited or whatever, back on the streets. Who knows? And 126 are listed as successful exits. That is the number we want to focus on. Successful exits, meaning they are no longer homeless that we know of, right? Because the fine line between addiction and, not on drugs at the moment is that changes so rapidly. And that's the vast majority of what we're talking about here. I mean, these are drug addicts. They live in these encampments, get easy access to drugs, easy access to, the illegal activities that are going to fund their drug problems. So several of the encampments were closed down after major incidents, such as the explosion. The explosion at an encampment outside Harborview Medical Center, a massive fire at the Mercer Street encampment. That's the one where the dude built a little tiny home, and also a woman I think she was in her 60s, was murdered, literally rolled up into the tarp, left there as 80,000 Seattleites whizzed by. And months of active drug trafficking and gun violence at the Ship Canal Bridge site. That's the one you would have seen me kind of walking around going, they're cleaning it up. When questioned by Como News about what the state can do to address public safety issues in the encampments, Inslee said outreach and housing are the solution. All right. By doing what we're doing, the report today is we are cleaning up a major site. This encampment is being eliminated. The place by Harborview is gone. We're making progress, and we know that's stunning to report at times, but it's true. Yeah, but there's also encampments that are developing elsewhere that are brand new. We haven't even talked about those. There's about 2,000 homeless encampments still left that need to be cleaned up, under the same condition. 2,000. While most of the people from the encampments were placed into housing through outreach, several did not accept offers of housing, and new encampments have formed within a few blocks of the now closed encampment on Myers Way. But that is the backdrop. Okay. That's the backdrop.
So there's two ways to look at this encampment right away initiative. One, we want to remove these encampments. We are making big progress. And two, we're doing it by getting people into housing, and importantly, getting them to deal with their chemical addiction problems and their mental health problems and their vocational challenges. We're going as fast as we can with the money that we have been given. That was substantial. We appropriated about $135 million so far. We're getting to the end of that.
Governor, by your estimation, you'd spend $135 million on this right-of-way initiative, but the Commerce website says that only 126 exits have happened. How do you justify that price tag? How do you justify that price tag, Governor?
We done? I'm done. For you guys, I want to answer the question that was just asked. Come here, Philly. Come here. I want to tell you something, that last question. How do I justify the fact that we're making an investment to clean up these encampments? I'll tell you how I justify it. These people are working their fannies off, and they're doing great work, and they got families at home, and every single one of them like to eat, and they like to pay their rent, and we need to pay them, and we don't expect them to do it for free. They're hard-working people, but I pay them. That work is making this a better state. And you're working hard too. This is hard work. You're out in the heat, you're wearing hazmat suits, and you're getting the job done, and you're helping people. not just about removing people from encampment. You're helping people. You're changing people's lives. I know the people. They've told me you've saved their lives. I met a guy down in Vancouver. He said, look, this tiny home village, it saved my life. I was on drugs. It was going to kill me. So you got to be proud of your work. I'm proud of your work. Keep it up. And I hope we can keep funding your work. Keep it up. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you. Governor, the other part of the question was that's more than $1 million for each one of these successful exits.
That's false. Don't repeat that because it's false.
That's the numbers according to Commerce's website. Is that justified?
You're just wrong. We've had 800 people get housing.
But according to Commerce's website, it says 126 successful exits. That's more than $1 million per successful exit.
Thank you.
That's according to Commerce's website that I'm looking at, sir. I just wanted to know if you can help me explain what that number means.
When you build an apartment, it's not just for one person. It's around for 50 years. So that seems like a big number. But when you have to build an apartment that costs $1 million, it's good for 50 years. So that number that seems big to you is not big when you realize you have to build a building. It's going to serve hundreds of people. Maybe it only served 100 now, but it's going to serve 1,000 over 50 years. That's the reason.
Okay. Thank you, Governor.
So here's the numbers. This is from Brandy Cruz. So you got, $143 million. 1,299 people have been swept out of camps. So it costs $110,000 just to sweep somebody out of a camp. $110,000 just to shoo them away, right? We're not counting where they're going, any of that. $164,000 per person who accepted housing, because there's 870 people who accepted housing, right? So, and then 126 of those have gotten out of the housing, the unhoused, the homelessness situation. And that's 1.1 million. So those are kind of your raw numbers. Now, what Ensley is saying here with Jonathan Cho is the 1.1 is misleading. He says it's misleading and it's a lie because it includes, call it 60 million of capital. All right. So here's where Brandy Cruz takes over and provides some more information here. So here's the money they spent. If you take out what Governor Jay is talking about, the 60 million towards capital allocations, Brandy comes up with that number. That still leaves us with a 661,000 per person to get them out of homelessness. And that is just absolutely shocking that this is the number. Where is that money going? And I recognize that there are, folks got to get paid for cleaning up the garbage, but literally, and there's a 12-minute podcast, this podcast here by Brandy Cruz, this segment here, she talks about Andrea Suarez. She talks about the fact that, they're getting people into treatment. They're getting people off the streets. They're cleaning encampments up, not entirely because the city won't let them because, they're doing such good work that the city basically says, no, you guys aren't, We Heart Seattle. You guys are not authorized. Therefore, we don't like you. And in fact, they kind of hammer on them, and they have in the past anyway. So there are entities out there that are running off of donations that are doing equal work. And it's not costing either 1.1 million, nor is it costing even $660,000. So any which way that you want to look at these numbers, whether it's the 1.1 or whether it's the, 660 grand, these are insane numbers. Insane. You think there might be some accountability into this? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, it costs a lot. All those folks standing around and Jay's giving them a big hug. Well, yeah, those folks need to get paid. Correct. But garbage collection, it doesn't take that much. Outreach workers? No, not that much per person. So where's all this money going? Yeah. That's the question, isn't it? Where does all this money go? And you know what? The 1.1 to me, the aggregate number of 1.1 million per person, that is an accurate number because that is the true cost of what is being spent. It just doesn't reflect everything. But even when you do reflect everything and you bring it back in the way that Brandy Cruz did, you're left with close to 700 grand per person. I mean, that is just absurd. And we see these numbers all the time, right? You see these numbers all the time in media outlets and articles. And you're like, you know, a unit of housing costs XYZ. And you're like, well, why don't we just build some damn housing and, you know, give each one of them a house? You know, and Brandy Cruz indicated in her segment, problem with that is they're either still mentally incapacitated and they can't really live on their own, or they're wildly addicted to drugs, or a combination of both, which I've talked about and everybody else kind of knows this is the drill. So you can't just give them housing and go, all right, here you go, guys. Good luck with that. All right. Your mental issues, your mental instability, your whole drug addiction, you know, I hope you work that out on your own somehow. No, these numbers are horrific. But Governor Jay, his spin was on, right? He had his spin. But then when you dig deeper, a little bit deeper, you're still like, $660,000? I'm sorry. Because that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast. Because I'm kind of sitting back looking at all of these individuals and the data that they've brought. You know, Jeremy Harris with some of the original stories I covered on this. Jonathan Cho just going at the governor, just, hey, here's the data. What do you say? You know, he's got all of his data lined up. And then the governor comes back with a pretty good spin. But then Brandy Cruz sits down and crunches the numbers and goes, hey, wait a minute. Even if you still back out exactly what the governor is talking about, $660,000 per person. Okay, let's talk about the 126 people. Let's get the 126 people back up on the screen here. Our numbers again, 1,299 people swept out of, you know, all the encampments that have this $143 million has gone towards. 870 accepted, 126 successfully exited the system. What's the measure of that? And I know it's they're no longer in the system anywhere. Who's to say they aren't right back on the streets? I guarantee you half of those people, in excess of half of those people, will be back out homeless within the next 6 months, whatever it is, 3 months, 90 days, however you want to call it, guaranteed. So you take any which way you take these numbers, the books are cooked, right? I mean, there is something wildly out of whack going here. And this is it's absurd. So you can't give these folks a house, because what these folks need is they need treatment. That's the bottom line. And everybody knows, anybody who has been around these encampments recognizes and realizes that the underlying issue is addiction and mental health care issues. You got a lot of people that mentally shouldn't be walking around on their own. They need help. They need medication. They need people to work with them. But we just let those folks run around in society now. And in their efforts to quell the voices in their head, you know, when you go to an encampment, you see people screaming at the trees or screaming at the clouds, whatever it is they're doing. You know, they take drugs to try and make those voices go away, because it's so horrific what's going on in their head. Horrible situation. So you need to be able to get these folks into treatment or mental institution, or if they're breaking the law, I hate to say it, you got to send some people to jail. Well, we're just not doing that, right? We're just not doing that. So you can't just build them a house and expecting it to go well. All right, that's going to go great. And the vast majority of these folks, unless they truly go down the sober road, it ain't happening. It's not happening. And so for so many of these folks, there's really no way out, given the situation that they're in right now. And throwing all this money at them, I mean, you still got 2,000 encampments on right-of-ways, 2,000 encampments on right-of-ways in the state of Washington. And what you're seeing here, the numbers you are seeing here, are not unique to the state of Washington. You will see them in varying different forms, because each municipality, each state, each, county has kind of different ways that they account for things, different reports, different numbers. these numbers, the horrific numbers of somewhere between 660 grand and 1.1 plus million dollars, is not uncommon. It's not uncommon. And this is how you get those numbers. It's the accounting for these numbers that to me is like, where is that money going? And again, I go back to, I understand there are expenses involved, but did the folks that were, Jay had his arms around, did they look like folks that were making big bank? No, they're cleaning up garbage, right? And of course they're working hard. I get that. But does it take XYZ per person to make that go? I know these camps are horrific. You got 25 acres here that's just absolutely shattered. You've got green belts all across the state. You've got parks. You've got rest stops. Rest stops have just been overrun by homelessness, right? By drug addicts living in our parks. You can barely go to the bathroom, take a bathroom break at some of these stops because you're like, yeah, I think I'm just going to keep on going to the next one. Oh, that's not looking good either. And you'll literally go through these areas and go, oh my God, what is going on here? What happened? Yeah, it's kind of like that. So, trying to figure out where this money has gone. Yeah, salaries somewhere to the individuals involved. All right. I mean, maybe. All right. And even throwing out the 60 million in buildings, whatever it is, long-term structures, however you want to see that. It still doesn't explain the massive, massive number that we're talking about here. I mean, it's insane. And I know we're talking about we're talking about government bloat of the homeless industrial crisis. But when you start to look at these numbers, it is a real head scratcher. And what I would say is that we don't normally have this type of explanation from somebody such as the governor. You know what I mean? Saying, hey, this is the deal. But then even once he's done that, and then people go, wait a minute. All right, let's account for that as well. And here's that number. So the governor is basically saying it's about 660 grand per person. And that could even be wildly off because I would bet a lot of money. I'm not a gambling guy, but I would bet a lot of money that 126 is not a true 126. It's a fraction of that. It's something way less than that of people that have truly successfully exited the system. Because so much of this is based on addiction. I mean, the governor even says it's based on addiction. And we all know that to be true. And we know that this is helping people save lives. But does it cost that much? I mean, 1.1 million gross. I would use that as a gross number. I know Brandy Cruz did a follow up on why she included that, and she has her reasoning. And you know what? I think it's a logical number because it's gross. It includes all of the numbers. Yeah, there's some infrastructure in there, but okay, so what? It's still here's what you spent. Here's the end result. So that's a gross. Now your net. Call your net 660. Let's throw it into, some kind of quasi accounting terms, because I'm not really sure what kind of, accounting we're doing here. But let's back up for a second. Let's talk about the 164 grand here. These are people per homeless person who accepted housing. That could be as little, it's my understanding, that could be as little as one night in a shelter. That qualifies for accepted housing. They accepted housing. Well, not long term. We're not talking long term. They accepted housing. They accepted a shelter, whatever it is. So 164 grand. I mean, per person that just basically walked into a shelter, got a tiny home, whatever it is, what kind of measure, you want to quantify. Those are some wild, wild numbers. Like, does it really where did that money go? Right? I mean, that's the big issue is where did that money go? Are there all of these entities involved that are just sucking it out? I'd love to know. I'd love to see an accounting of where the money went, because it's certainly not going to physically cleaning up all of these encampments. Because there's a couple thousand left You know what I mean? And it takes so long for them to get to these. It's not a matter of them, these are dump fees, and those numbers don't make any sense, right? Getting the labor to clean them up. Okay. How much is it going to cost per encampment? I mean, sometimes they spend some huge numbers, but that's on the state because you've allowed this to happen. You've allowed this to happen. You've allowed folks to just live willy-nilly wherever, and you're not telling them, no, you can't live there in the future. And how do we know that? Because the minute they sweep out a camp, they move a block down the road and they set up camp there. Period. All day long. So this is whack-a-mole. And that is why you are seeing these numbers of the 126. It costs $1.137,256, $1.137 million per person that is, so-called exited the system. So does any of this make sense? Absolutely. It does to me, because the system is just so whacked and so out of control that this is why nothing is getting done. I mean, where's all the money going? Who knows? Who knows? Where is it going? It's kind of like, in the Joker from King County Regional Housing Authority, Mark Doan, I can't keep track. When that individual indicated we're going to need $11 billion, you need $11 billion. Even the folks in Seattle said, what? Hey, now, your budget's $250 million, right? King County Regional Housing Authority gets a budget of $250 million. We're only talking about $143 million here. And look at how whacked out that is. $250 million. I'd love to know how many folks actually, went into or have exited the system, because this isn't based upon helping people exit the system, is it? Because if it was, this is a massive, massive failure. This is to just spin your tax dollars. That's what's going on here. It's just spending your tax dollars, and then there's open hands for, we need more money. So whenever you hear, we need more housing, now you just need more money. You need more money. And then we're going to claim that it's going for housing. And does it really help people? Well, did $143 million help 126 people? Oh, I mean, maybe. And that's all we're talking about here in this podcast is the math, right? The math. Does the math make sense? Is the math reasonable? I mean, no, this is wildly out of whack, but we've known the homeless industrial, complex is based on just that. Some wacky logic that doesn't really go anywhere. Are there some success stories? Yeah, of course. You got the 126, right? And within there, you've probably got a handful of people, but does it take this much money to get there? Nah, you hear Andrea Suarez again tell the stories of how they basically go out and volunteer and they get results, and they don't spend $143 million. They spend whatever they have that folks donate to them, to We Heart Seattle. That's what they spend, because that's what's the money that they have. They operate truly on donations. So there's good people out there doing good work, but this program here, I mean, I have no reason to believe these numbers aren't correct, but when you look at them and you go, wow, hey now, what happened there? It's the homeless industrial complex. A lot of people are getting paid, and they need to keep getting paid. If they solve it, it goes away, right? It goes away. So what's the end goal here? Oh, yeah. Love to know, right? Wouldn't you? Everybody's got their theories on what it is. Let me know in the comments, what is your theory as to why the homeless industrial complex just keeps on a-rolling and we keep supporting it? And if we just had more housing, that's the one that drives me crazy. Really? Okay, so your housing is going to solve all these problems. Hell to the no. Just like 143 million was going to solve wait a minute, there's 2,000 camps left. Yeah. So on a per camp basis, we extrapolate these numbers on a per camp basis. What does that look like? I would love to know. So, what do we think? What's it going to take to sweep all 2,000 camps? Let's get those numbers going. Love to see an estimate for those, right? All right, $14 billion. I don't know what it would be, but these numbers are astronomical any which way you look at it. Massive amounts of waste, massive amounts of bloat, or something, right? Or something. Who knows? All right. That's it for me. Thanks so much for being here. I will catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.